Let's go. Hello, nice to see you again. This is The Next 6 Months, a tiny little show on YouTube, well, for the next few weeks at least, where management guru and writer, author of 99%, Mark Thomas, and me explore some of the big things that are shaping our world, looking ahead, not just the next day or two, but for the next 6 months. Now, Mark, a few days ago, you were telling me about this thing that you called the myth of unaffordability, the idea that governments would love to help us do this, that and the other, keep the libraries open and support the National Health Service, but they simply don't have the money. And you put forward some very convincing arguments showing that actually they could find the money if they wanted to. So I'm wondering, why is it that we all believe this myth, basically?
Very good question. Funny thing happened to me when I was writing the book, actually. I shared a draft of it with one of my brothers, and he read it, including the bit which deals at some length with this myth of unaffordability. And about a week later, he sent me an article that he had read from a journalist repeating the myth and saying, Britain's in grave danger of turning into Italy and we'll go bankrupt if we don't tackle our finances. And he said, is this true? So first of all, I thought, well, how is it that my brother, who's just read the book, still isn't clear that it's not true? But then when I reflected, I thought, well, actually, if I'm completely honest about this, there's a little bit of me that emotionally believes it's true. Okay. And that really puzzled me because I thought I've spent months researching this. I know all the facts. I know that article is rubbish. And there's a little tiny bit of me that believes it. Why is that? And I came to the conclusion that it's something to do with the zeitgeist. So if you think back to the end of the Second World War, debt to GDP at the end of the Second World War, we saw the chart the other day, was over 250%.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And yet the UK, the population voted for a Labour government that promised to introduce the very expensive welfare state and NHS. Now, why was it that they were prepared to do that at that time, and we did not do the equivalent thing after the global financial crisis?
Okay, so after the war, let me just make sure I'm understanding this, because you've got a mind that races ahead like a thoroughbred racehorse here. So after the war, we really were skint. I mean, that's what wars do to people. They do impoverish them. So we really didn't have any money.
Absolutely. We had never had debt at that level before. Okay. Now, it would have been much more plausible intellectually at that point to argue that with debt that literally had never been seen before, we shouldn't be rushing to invest. Yeah. But if you think about the psychological process that people had been through during the war, at the beginning of the war, we were fairly sure we were going to lose. Everybody was telling Churchill he should be negotiating peace terms, and he refused. And after the Battle of Britain, it became clear that we had control of our airspace and probably we wouldn't lose. Right. But there was still no particular prospect of winning. It was just that we could hold out on the island. And then gradually our position strengthened, Hitler's position weakened, America joined the war, and it started to look quite plausible that we might win. And then it looked as if we were winning, and then we actually did win. So psychologically, people had gone from near despair to a position of real hope and a belief that apparently insurmountable obstacles can be overcome. So you've got that dimension of moving from despair to hope. Wow. But at the same time, you've got another dimension, because before the war, there was high levels of inequality. In order to win the war, a national government introduced rationing, for example. Yeah. So at least to some extent, everybody was in it together. If my family was struggling because we didn't have as much meat as we wanted, well, so was every other family in the country. Sure. And so there was a real feeling based on reality of shared sacrifice. And so we emerged from the war with a national zeitgeist of hope and solidarity. Now, if that's your mindset and somebody says, look, debt's very high, but we've got this beautiful idea for a national health service where we can provide healthcare to everybody, regardless of their means, people said, let's go for it. But if you've got the opposite zeitgeist, if you've just had 40 years of being told that rugged individualism is the way, and if you want something for your own family, you'd better provide it for yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
And indeed, if you've gradually drifted from a position of hope to one of despair because your experience is that life is getting tougher and tougher, and then somebody says, well, debt's at 100% now, and I'm afraid we can't do it. It resonates. It tallies with your own experience. You're not feeling we're all together, and you're not feeling hopeful. So it resonates emotionally, and I think that's fundamentally the reason we swallowed it. That we have got a very different zeitgeist now.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So what you're saying basically is, I mean, we are all depressed as heck at the moment, aren't we? Really? I mean, we had a day or two of elation after the American election results came through, and apparently a new vaccine has come out for this COVID thing, but it's kind of going down again. So what you're saying?
It's been
go on.
A few other positive things recently. I mean,
I missed them. I missed them.
Well, you missed them on the climate side. Biden has made it clear that one of his first actions will be to go back into the Paris Accords. And because Britain is now so isolated internationally, we've now sort of recommitted ourselves also on the climate side. So
that's all right.
Actually, the last 10 days or so, I mean, I don't normally like to drink champagne, but I have made an exception in the last 10 days or so.
Wow, Mark, this is a message of hope. But getting back to your serious point, I mean, it's not just about feeling good, feeling bad. We're happy one day, we're not so happy the next day. It's about, I guess, expectations, isn't it? It's about what we want them to do.
It's about what we want them to do, and about us having a belief as people developed during the war that you can overcome difficult obstacles, but you have to be together, you have to be united, and you have to stick at it, and it might take some time.
Yeah, of course, the way that politics has been going these past decade or two, that's been the opposite. We've had, I suppose, what was that thing that Margaret Thatcher said to us about no such thing as society, that, you're all out there basically competing in a sort of nasty Darwinian universe. And it was all rather bleak. And now I think we're seeing the consequences. We're seeing the Instagram generation of people whose only priority is themselves. It makes us all feel rather juvenile, don't you think?
Well, I think it is a core part of the market fundamentalist ideal that, as you say, Margaret Thatcher said, there's no such thing as society. There are only men and women and families. Right. And so, the limit of your concern in that philosophy is to look after your own family. Right. That's your duty, that's your responsibility. But most people don't feel like that. And I think actually it is true that we have a lot of market fundamentalists in the cabinet right now, but a lot of people who've been very senior, even in the Tory party up until very recently, don't think that way. And on the website there's an article about the market fundamentalist philosophy, and the first person I quote is Philip Hammond. Now, he wasn't a left-winger, he was a right-wing politician, but he shares the views that most people in the country share, that there is such a thing as society, there is such a thing as morality. And I believe the vast majority of people do still have a sense of morality, and that's what gives the foundation for the idea that we can have a unified force.
This is very interesting stuff, Mark. If you've got a question for Mark, and we do have some questions actually, we're going to deal with them some tomorrow. If you've got a question, just leave them here on YouTube in the comments section. We'll pick them up and Mark will answer. We'll see you tomorrow.